Big hello to you. Welcome back to the channel. I'm Jennifer Kirk, welcoming you back here. And today we've got something really special. I'm honoured to be joined by Simon Kohler from Hornby, often seen as the public face of that brand. And today's video, of course, is brought to you in association with our sponsor, Trainomatic, makers of DCC decoders and accessories. So Simon, it's great to see you. I hope I find you well, and I hope that lockdown has been treating you well. I know we've all had to come to terms with this technology to be able to do these things, but we've got everything up and running now. So have you had a great Christmas and New Year?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a Christmas that everybody had, really. You know, it was a very personal one, my wife and I, which was actually quite, in some ways, quite nice. Because normally we've got a load of people in the house, certainly on Boxing Day, and
Mm.
it was just nice to have a bit of a, a one-to-one, as it were, really. So quiet, like everybody.
Of course, yeah. But of course, you've been building up as well to the 2021 releases, and the 2020 releases, we did those on the channel, covered all of those, and they were so exciting. In fact, I've got one of them just above me on the shelf, and everybody's been speculating, would you rest on your laurels for 2021 or whether you'd come out with a bang? And I think people have seen that very much there's no resting on laurels whatsoever. It's come out with a bang. I think it's the largest number of products that you've announced for a single year release, isn't it? Somebody said to me it's about 350,
Yeah,
360 new products.
yes, that's it. The one of the key factors there really is that years ago, if you introduced a new livery on a coach, it would be the composite and it would be the brake. But of
Hmm.
course now, where you just had two coaches, now you of course we have a whole diagram of them. So that certainly adds quite a number to any range, really.
And what I also have to ask as well, I described you in the intro as the public face of Hornby, but could you explain for the viewers just what exactly is your job role at Hornby?
Marketing and product development director, which is a very long title, but basically it it is sort of keeping an eye on the development of not just Hornby, but Scale Electric, Airfix to a degree, and Corgi, and obviously a little bit where Humbrol is concerned. My main, and I think everybody is aware of this, if you like, my main passion um, is the Hornby side. But with all the brands, we're very lucky that we've got brand leaders who are really passionate about their brands and what goes in them. So my job is relatively straightforward. As I say, it's just keeping an eye on things. And from a marketing perspective, again, trying to just keep an eye on things and move it forward. Be, if you like, a little bit more progressive than we have been in the past. The lockdown has made us all think differently. I think everybody's had to think differently. And our form of communication, if we take Hornby, the railway side, we've got no exhibitions, which I missed dreadfully. We've got no trade shows, which again I missed. I probably missed getting out. I think, like everybody misses
Hmm.
getting out. So we've had to look at other ways of communication. Social media, which has some people have mixed feelings about it, but social media at the moment has proved to be very, very important. And I don't think things will ever go back to the way they were. And I think social media will become stronger, more varied, and it will develop. And
Hmm.
we are spending a lot of time on working with the social media side of life, with YouTube, and really getting out there Not just talking to people like yourself, Jenny, but people who may be coming into the hobby, maybe returning to the hobby or whatever. So we're trying to make it fascinating, interesting. The only way we can do that really at the moment is social media.
Very much. And Hornby is often seen as being the leaders in this area. You've got your own YouTube channel that is pretty much the most successful of any manufacturer. So it does seem that Hornby has very much embraced this new medium and has shown the way, I guess, perhaps even for other manufacturers to follow.
We learn from other industries. We learn from other people. Look, I've always said that this business is on the railway side is quite tight. We're all in it together. We all want to do the same thing. We're all passionate about what we do, and we learn really from each other. I mean, it's not that long ago that our friends at Barwell. I mean, I was looking at really what they were doing and should we be doing it and could we do it and could we do it better? And I think since I returned from what I call my enforced sabbatical, we spend a lot of time developing the video side of life. We do have a proper video department. We have each brand will have their own social media person. So it's just a different way of doing things, but we learn from other people. I think that's probably what I'm saying. We're not isolationists. What can we get? What can we learn?
Definitely. And I suppose, I mean, I do have to ask about what actually got you interested in model railways. But before I come to that, I just want to ask, how has the pandemic affected the retail of products and the development, as well as, we've talked about how we've had to replace shows with a virtual way of getting product information out there. But how has that affected the retail and the development of new products?
Well, from the development side, it's luckily we have teams, we have designers who can work at home, so that's pretty good. Up to really December, we were able to still keep the office COVID safe. We were still working well within in what the government was saying and what they're asking us to do. And since December, obviously, with things getting incredibly worse, what happens now is that each department, probably once a week or whatever, will get together over a particular project. There's one project that the Hornby team will be getting together on tomorrow and discussing. But what does that mean? Well, it means that we have a very big room. We have about 4 people who can't be, who are more than 2 meters apart. They're probably more about 5 meters apart. And they have a conversation. We have a big screen, a projection on the wall where, you're talking about the design. So we're able to work that through. From marketing perspective, yet again, working from home and, modern technology, as you just said, we've all had to learn how to use it. And I have often said that really, if this situation had cropped up 10 years ago, possibly even 5, it would have been very difficult to work the way we're working now. So technology's helped, and we're making the best of what we can do. And I think everybody is doing the same, no matter what business they're in. I personally like to have face-to-face meetings. I think it's a lot more personal. That's why I like exhibitions and so on. You're talking to somebody, you're getting the vibes, you're getting response. But yeah, no. Sorry to really, I've waffled a bit really. But to answer your question, has it affected us? It must have done to a certain extent, because where we have if you like the Hornby team together, the Corgi team together, etc. And you'll have perhaps a marketing person just talking to the designer. Say, "Oh, does that loco have 4 wheels or is it 3?" You know, now those sort of instant questions we have to do it through Teams, etc. So there's a bit of a lag there. It can't be face to face. But I think we are, we're progressing. We're doing the best we can, like most people do.
Has it affected the factory out in China in terms of slowing down new products coming through?
I think to a certain extent, initially, yes. I mean, the Chinese are very resilient people, and they will put that extra time in to try and catch up. But you only need, and it doesn't matter whether you've got COVID or whatever, but you only need a tool trial to go wrong, where perhaps a pin drops or whatever, and it can really mess the whole tool up. So you can have delays. So you'll always have these delays. Things like the APT, which was always going to be tight to get it in for 2020, always. That has created some issues, which I think we're now probably. I think it's about May time. The APT will appear. So to answer your question, I would say COVID must have had some effect, but not as much as one would expect, because other factors come in which do delay manufacturing. But at the end of the day, I've always said I would rather have a product that looks right, works right, and everything right, rather than chase a date. And I think most people are the same.
Definitely. And actually, I want to take you back as well. I hinted at it at the start of the interview. I'm just curious, what first got you interested in model railways? I know everybody has often a very personal story of either a person that introduced them to the hobby, or if it was a moment in time, seeing something in the real world that inspired them. But for you, where did your journey begin?
I think. I've been asked this question quite a lot last year. I think probably most people are aware. I mean, I was born in a little town called Louth in Lincolnshire. And in those days, it had a railway. And we used to see, like the school I went to, at the bottom of the playing field, there was the railway line. So most people went to that school, were interested in trains. My brother, who was 2 years older than me, was really, really interested in trains. He was a proper train spotter. I mean, he went everywhere, and it was great. I mean, in those days, how old would he be? Probably about 13. He'd be going to King's Cross. He'd be going to Doncaster, because it's all in the eastern region. He'd go miles at 13. And I think most parents these days would panic. And I think my mother used to say, "Don't take sweets from strangers," which I thought was always a funny thing, because maybe they'd poison it. I didn't understand the deep meaning about it. Anyway, so he was interested in it, and my mother was a widow, and he wanted a train set, and she wasn't going to buy Triang, because she'd had a bad run-in with Triang Tricycle. So Hornby Dublo is what Hornby was the name. She knew that stood for quality and so on. So how she did it, I think it must have been 1960. She bought a Hornby Dublo train set. Actually, it must have been 59. Anyway, she bought this Hornby Dublo train set, which was one of the first 2 rail that Hornby had produced. And so it had a little, what was it, an E1, E2 loco in it.
Is it the R1?
The R1, thank you. Sorry, was the R1. So he had this, and put it on a board. It was basically spent a lot of his money on getting the points and so on. So he put it on this board. And of course, like every sibling, he's got it on one. And so And it was fun. And I said, right, Mum, can I have a train set for next Christmas? Well, it nearly broke, I think, the first train set. So there was no way I would get a train set. But I did get a black old one. I got a TPO, and I had great fun with that. But one thing and another, trains. I used to go with my brother all to the Louth station or whatever. I was probably more of a nuisance, and I was just fascinated with these big, great steam engines. I was fascinated with playing trains, as it were, etc. I wasn't as diehard as he was, but times move on, and I sort of crossed to the dark side and got more interested in scale electric, which was a bit more wham bam. But I was always interested in the model side of life, and I had a good friend. But we moved to Northampton. I had a good friend whose father owned the model shop in Northampton, Wellingborough Road, and I obviously spent time in the shop. Nick, he enjoyed radio control. He did control line flying, etc. But we spent time in the shop, and so we immersed in that modern field. When I was 21, sadly Nick's father died, and he asked me to come and help out in the shop, which I did, and that became my career for 7 years. And of course, that was in the 70s, so 71 through to about 78. That was an incredible time certainly in model railway period, because that's when Airfix came on board, main line, etc., General Mills main line, and the whole industry sort of started to change. And that's really, I became fascinated, if you like, in the business as opposed to playing trains and operating trains.
Yeah.
But it's always been, it'd be nice to do it, make a layout and so on. But it was always time, things change. I got obviously involved. I moved from the model shop to Hammond Morgan to Hornby, and became immersed. That was my life, if you like. I got married again, etc. And then you have all the other things that come with married life: houses, repairs. I was always Bob the Builder at weekends. And really, it was only this Christmas that I got a family fun project and put this layout together for my wife's grandson. So in all these years, it's my 50th year this year of being in the business. It took me 50 years to actually build a layout on my own, which I gave away. So that's a bit potted. So it's part of my DNA, really. I'm just interested in railways, model railways in general. It's all to do with social history, and I love history. I watch anything to do with history, and I just find it fascinating. I do, and the business side.
Very much. And you alluded at the beginning there, actually, something that leads really nicely into the next question. You said about how much the train sets were actually costing back then for that R1 Hornby Dublo set. And I know it's one of the big topics of conversation. I see it everywhere. People always pick up on price. And actually, when you multiply through by inflation, we're probably at the same real term cost as that R1 set cost back in whenever. But I mean, do you feel that the rise in price, is this something that Hornby always has an eye on, how they can keep that down? Do you think that it's sustainable for a hobby?
Yeah, all good questions, those. First and foremost, I always look at a Mars bar. I mean, we could never afford a Mars bar. I mean, if you got a Mars bar, that was like Christmas. And that was sixpence. That's 2.5 pence. And it was a good size Mars bar, not like you get these days. Mars bar now, proper Mars bar is what, over £1? So do the maths, as the Americans would say. So I agree with you. You know, you can look at these inflation charts and compare an HST of 1970 and compare to what it is now, and you will find it's probably not that far. You know, inflation-wise, it's probably
Mm.
on a par. But you get, of course, you're getting a lot more for your money now than
Yeah,
you
yeah,
did. You know, you had in seven whenever it was first launched, 70 something or other, 72, 73, you had it was a Ringfield motor,
yeah,
and that was it. Now, anybody who's brave enough to take the body off an HST, it's absolutely cram full of labour intensive assembly. I mean,
yeah,
it's that simple. So, you know, I personally do think, I know somebody's going to say, well, he would say that, wouldn't he? I personally think it is good value.
yeah,
Now, the thing people have to also realise is we have to manufacture. We have to, part of what we charge Mr. Retailer. Part of that has to be a reinvestment.
yeah,
Okay? Because if we don't reinvest, if we keep the status quo, we won't invest,
mm.
and eventually it becomes a spiral, and you disappear. Mr. Retailer has to make a profit, else because he has to invest in stock and so on. So you'll always have that chain. Now, of course,
Mm.
there are some manufacturers who sell directly to the public. So you have a bit of a double whammy there. But
Mm.
the whole point, what I'm trying really to stumble over and explain, is that as a company, I'm very, very conscious of cost of an item,
Yeah,
and I will analyze it. In fact, this very morning, um, we were looking at this project. This project is going to be discussed tomorrow. We came up with a better solution at something that will cost less,
mm.
which in turn will have a better reflection on the end retail price.
Mm.
So I don't sit in my ivory tower and think, right, 250 quid is only going to cost us 3 and 8 pence to make a foot. Don't think that. I have to go through it in stages. Is that reasonable? And obviously, I do have a target because we're a company, we're a PLC, and sometimes it might be a point or two over. Sometimes it might be a couple of points below.
Mm.
So price, cost is a consideration. But at the end of the day, I think if people look up what was available in 1970 to what is available now and the cost, I think
Mm.
they will find hand on heart it is value for money. But it's only value for money if you've got the money to spend on it. If you
Yeah,
haven't, then it's expensive. I'm
that's
very
it, I suppose. Yeah. And I guess at the end of the day, model railways, like any other hobby, is always been a luxury. But one of the things actually I was very, very pleased to see in the Hornby 2021 announcements was the play trains range. So it's nice to see that even though you're catering for the modeler who wants all of this high fidelity detail, they want all the DCC functionality, the lights, everything like that, at the other end of the scale, you haven't neglected bringing the newcomers into the hobby. And how important as a company do you see that as being to make sure that new people come in at the bottom to start the hobby?
I've always been very passionate about getting people into the hobby.
Hmm.
I remember announcing back in 82, I think it was, 83, the Thomas range. And I showed it to all the model press there. And their faces was, it was as if I'd actually been whistling in church. I mean,
Hmm.
it was something what are they doing?
Hmm.
The problem is, if you don't encourage people into the hobby at a young age, then you lose the grassroots. You're
Yes.
then hoping that somebody's going to stumble over it at a later date, and that's not going to happen. That, you know, years ago, on any, and I'm definitely not being sexist here, but that's the way the world was.
Mm.
Back in the day, you know, on a boy's list was a train set, a bicycle, and a pair of roller skates. That was, you know, that was the ultimate. Nowadays, that the world has changed, and thank goodness it has. But you know, you have to say that those people who came into the hobby, and people of my age and perhaps younger, you know, I get it that they say, oh, yeah, my dad bought me a Thomas set, and you know, that really got me into it. Now, what happens is they'll either stay with it, but the chances are they'll get to a certain age where they'll leave it alone, because you then have what we used to call motorbikes and girlfriends. See, and then as time progresses, maybe they're beginning to settle down more. Maybe they've got a family of their own or whatever. And you know, the mother, because the mother always rings the son, and will say something along the lines of, "Oh, your dad's been in the loft. He's found your old trace. Do you want me to take the boot fair or whatever?" No, I want it. No, don't throw that away, because those are memories.
Yes.
And I'm saying blokes, it could be girls as well, but it is, you know, those are memories, precious memories, children's memories, when life was simple. So they get the train, and they probably wait till, you know, the kids are in bed or whatever. They'll just plug it together. I just wanted to see if you did. And you know what? It does work, and it probably just goes around a little oval, and they go, "Oh yeah, it's just good, yeah," and all those lovely warm fuzzy feelings come back. And then they, you know, then they may find themselves, I don't know, in WH Smith's or the local newsagents getting the Sunday paper or whatever, and they'll look up and oh, they used to do magazines, didn't they? And they'll look up, and they will, you know, you go to WH Smith's, you can see a whole row. You know, go to Sainsbury's. I was there Saturday, whole row, and you'll say, oh, there's the Hornby magazine. There are others, but they may say the Hornby magazine. Oh yeah, Hornby, I remember, yeah. And they'll look at, and then the juices start to flow. And you don't, you know, it's not a question of, you know, right, they're straight in and they're buying, you know, the most expensive locos. What they're doing, they'll look at it, and it'll grow again, it'll foster. And that's what I'm trying to say here. You know, that will then develop, and then that can develop in different ways. Whether they just want to see the trains running around, whether they want to create the models, you know, like a picture, a moving picture, whatever. But what they will, you know, whatever it is, you want them to come back into the hobby. If you do not have them at that early stage, if you do not have those warm, fuzzy feelings, you've lost, you know, you've lost that market. And if we lose that market, we don't have a business. When I say we, I mean everybody. I mean, the model railway becomes an old-fashioned toy. And that's anything but what it is. Okay, so play trains, yes, fantastic. I mean, it wasn't something we dreamt up overnight. That is something that's been bubbling around since before I left Hornby. Certainly when it came back, we had a serious look at it. This what we have with play trains is, if you like, an evolution of 3 years. And what has been a big part of it is Montana Horan as well, because she's brought a different perspective into it as well, which is great. And of course, it ties in with the way the world is going as well. So it isn't just plastic track with a train goes round. It's got lots of things going with it, but also we'll have stories. You know, they'll be able to link to a specific play train website. They'll be able to have stories about the characters and so on. They'll be able to write their own stories. We'll have stories going back and forth. So they become part of it. And these are all building up lovely memories of what, you know, we hope will come to fruition as they get older. The
Brilliant.
big explanation, and I'm sorry, it's very long-winded. I really, really, really am passionate that at last we have something that we can get our teeth into, and it's a good grassroots railway system.
Very much, because it brings the new people into the hobby. And to touch on what you said before, it's like, to have nostalgia for something, you have to have had that something in the first place to come back to.
Correct. Now, I've got lots of nostalgia. I mean, when I as I say, I've already explained, didn't have two halfpennies to rub together, but I remember seeing my first A4. I was at Doncaster, at Rossington, which is just outside of Doncaster. It was a mining area, and I remember being at the gate, and this dirty, great, big, streamlined loco. It's a street. Everybody was. It's the first time I ever saw it. I remember it to this day. I remember the fish trains hammering through, pulled by 9Fs, going through Louth Station, step back. You had the porters telling the kids to get back. Life is full of memories, and young memories as well. And railways, I don't know what it is. There's a magic about it. I don't think I'm unique. I think there's a lot of people like me. You remember. And I'm still fascinated. I go to King's Cross or whatever. Well, it used to be able to go to King's Cross. I still stand there. I'm still in awe. When I'm going up to York, when we go through Doncaster, I'm always fascinated to see what's in the sidings. And that's what we used to do years gone by. Anyway, sorry, I waffle. But I mean, play trains, terrific. Anything that gets the youngsters into it, got to be a good thing.
And I'm very interested to see, obviously, the 2021 range. There's a wealth of new models being announced in there. We've got the mail coach has come out to go with the rocket as well in that set, which I know a lot of people have been asking for. It's turned up. The goods wagons to go with that too. But also we've got that full range of the 4- and the 6-wheel coaches in the range of different liveries with and without lighting. And I do wonder, how important is it to bring out completely new models every year compared to re-liveries and renumberings of things that are already in the range?
It is important. I mean, this business thrives on new introductions. Again, the world has changed. If you look at a Hornby catalogue or a Tryon catalogue back in the 60s, it was incredibly thin. Now this one is 200 odd pages. This latest one, 228 pages. So it's important that you keep adding new product to the range. I mean, those 4- and 6-wheel coaches, they've been an interest of mine since about 2010, 2011. I've always, the little 4-wheel coach that Hornby had in its range, had it in its range back in the 70s, and that was made up. That was a stopgap wagon or coach rather. It was made up of a brake van chassis and and 2 bits that clicked on the top, and that was it. And that, I mean, we've used it for Annie, Clarabelle. It's been in the range forever and a day. But I was always struck when I used to see the ratio kits. When I was in retail, the number of ratio kits used to sell, those little 6-wheel coaches, Great Western coaches, was enormous. And I thought, well, there has to be an opportunity there. And because leaving Hornby, I had all these plans, and having left Hornby for a few years and working with people like Oxford, we had all these ideas coming through. So I had lots of the design information and types and so on. And so really that just was on the list and came back to Hornby. So yeah, the demand is there, the interest is there, and I can tell you that the range has been live for just under a week, and obviously we've struck gold. There's a lot of interest. So
very much. I mean, I was talking to my local retailer, and he's actually said that, in particular, the London, Brighton, and South Coast Railway livery, the Southern Railway livery, he says he's just getting loads of orders in for those. And it seems that for so many years, we've had these lovely pre-grouping locomotives in the pre-grouping liveries. And for years and years, people have been asking, well, what if we haven't got anything to go behind it? And it's every year I remember looking at the range and going, well, where's the pre-grouping rolling stock to go with these locomotives? And finally, we've got the means to build up a full train. And I know that some of the packs, we've got the Great Western Terrier with the 3 coaches in the train pack, things like that. And, hop picker specials down in Kent on the Kent and East Sussex Railway. There's so many different applications for those. It's almost like once it comes to the market, you end up feeling like, well, why did it take so long?
I'm not going to speak for other companies. I'll speak for Hornby. One of the problems Hornby had, as a lot of people realise, is that prior to about 1997, Hornby was wrapped up in producing toys, dolls for boys, dolls for girls, soft toys, etc. And really, its core brands, as I said, Scale Electric and Hornby, were relatively the poor relation. So very little investment in those brands, while other companies, and again, Batman for one, was making inroads into the business. Now they were pushing model railways further, more than really Hornby. They were breaking fresh ground. And of course, when things changed, when we had a change of management, and all the toys were thrown away, we were able to refocus. Then we had about 10 years that we had to make up on, and so it really was a question of putting our efforts in and getting plates turning. So we had to, look at steam locos, diesel coaches, etc., and get these plates going. You can't do it all at once. One, these things have to be engineered through, and they have to be developed. They have to be manufactured. So you can't all of a sudden say, right, I want 20 newly tooled items. The manpower isn't there. It's not practical. So it had to be phased in. Of course, everything was going hunky-dory until about 2000 and whatever it was, 2009, when the financial crash happened, and then all things changed again. And so there was a bit of a slow turn, and then Hornby did have that situation between 2014 through to 2017, 2018, where things weren't necessarily as there had been. So there's a little bit of a gap there. So we've got, we're sort of investing more, but I've got plans. We've got 5-year plans moving forward. As I said, but it can't all be done at once. So it has to be done, obviously, in stages. So I agree with you. The business of producing these lovely liveried locos, what are they going to pull? Got nothing to pull. And that was always the big thing. But there was always something more important that would come along, or invest in that. And so eventually, with the working, Oxford was working slightly differently from what Hornby was. And we were able to bring a lot of what Oxford had to offer in the operation to Hornby. So nowadays, for example, decisions can be made a lot quicker than they used to be able to. And that's very, very important. Whereas, it could take 3 months to get approval on, a new loco or whatever. Now, providing the numbers stack up, these things can be agreed in a week, 2 weeks. So the world changes. Now, I won't bore you too much with the internal side of life, but um, it you know, it is looking at things differently from what we used to look at, and it is also being aware, really, what the market is asking for.
Very
More,
much.
more
And I
so.
want to ask, Hornby as a brand's obviously just passed its centenary, and as a household name, obviously, if you ask any person in the street, name a brand of model railway, you can almost guarantee that they're going to say Hornby. It's become synonymous with model railways as far as the wider public are concerned. Does this put unique pressures on Hornby in terms of market expectations and constantly having to be seen to evolve and build on that success?
Very good question. Um, Obviously, we're all very conscious of the heritage that Hornby has, and very conscious of the position we're in. We never, ever take it for granted.
Hmm.
Never been one to live off Hornby's name. I think we were very lucky during the 80s and the early parts of the 90s to get away with what we did, because there was no investment. And I can remember thinking, well, what, I've got no new loco. And I was told once, after we produced the 2800 back in the 80s, I was told Hornby would never ever invest in another new loco. Exactly. My feelings entirely. And I remember leaving it a year and then introducing the Flying Scotsman, and that was when we introduced a group of Flying Scotsman. The year escapes me now, but I had to really sell that to guys who didn't understand modern railways, didn't understand the market, only just about were aware of what scale electric was all about, but go more than 4 wheels and that was it. You had an issue. So, we've sort of just conscious of what the name stands for, and we have to maintain that. We cannot make it look cheap or feed off it or anything like that. We have to keep investing in the brand and have confidence in the brand. I would hate it. I really would hate it if it was what's the word? It was abused just for the name. That's not what it's all about. Hornby's great. It's a lovely name, but I have to, and we have to live up to the name. The people who are at Hornby at the moment are custodians of the brand. We're not here forever. There'll be other people, and we are investing in people who will take over. I mean, I'm not going to be at Hornby forever, although a lot of people think, trust me, I won't. And you need people to take over and have the same interest, the same passion, And I think what people forgot a few years ago, what Hornby really was, what it stands for. We have to maintain that, and we will maintain that. If you don't, then it loses all relevance, I'm afraid, and it just becomes another name. No, I'd hate that.
Very much.
Brand you've got behind you, Hornby Dublo on the Athol there.
Yeah.
I didn't introduce that because, hey, great. I introduced because Hornby Dublo means something, and that's why we have more Hornby Dublo in the range this year, because it's a great brand.
Yeah, I mean, I whooped with joy, to be honest, last year when the Duchess of Athol, when I saw that announcement, because, like you say, for me, my childhood memories are Hornby Dublo. I inherited my father's Hornby Dublo, and so that was my childhood set, my nostalgia. So to see my nostalgia making a reappearance was absolutely magic, and I can't believe that I was alone in that. And it's so lovely to see that there are more models coming through with the Hornby Dublo branding on. I just think that that is a great move.
As I said earlier, I mean, in many respects, you know, we do sell nostalgia,
Mm.
and without doubt, the Hornby Dublo does have a nostalgic feel about it. And I'd like to think that, albeit, you know, what is it, 50 odd years ago since the last Hornby Dublo loco was produced, that what we have here is like a natural progression of where it would be if, you know, it had continued
Yeah.
to evolve. So yeah, again, but it's a precious thing. You know, it wasn't introduced lightly. It was introduced really to highlight a particular decade when Hornby Double O started to come back after the war, um, and it really sort of generated an interest for me to think, well, you know, it, we can perhaps extend the range for 21 with some new models. And I do remember an instance when I was a rep, I think it was in Leicester, and I remember a guy walking out. He had bought a load of Hornby, taking it all back because he was reliving his youth. And he sold what he had bought, the Hornby with the plastic bodies, etc., and bought a load of Wren. And as he walked out, he said, "This is Hornby," because of the weight and the feel. And I think that did actually tell me something about, you know, what Hornby Double O means to an awful lot of people.
It's pretty much what my father used to say.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask that Hornby has primarily continued with releasing models in just Double O rather than developing parallel ranges in other scales. I know you've dabbled a bit with N-Gauge with the Arnold brand, but that's not really continued. I just wonder, is this a conscious decision by Hornby just to stick to Double O, or is the door open to venture into other scales in the future?
I think that there's more than enough for us to be getting on with in Double O. Yeah, you're right. We did dabble in N-Gauge, and it was, you know, mixed success. It wasn't as if we'll never do N-Gauge again. You know, I do have a couple of ideas that we could do, but I hark back to what I said earlier. You know, there's only so much we can do in a year, and so much we can develop in a year. And I think at the moment, you know, we're probably at the limit of what we can actually squirt through the system. So, although, you know, if something really cropped up, you know, then yeah, I would look at it. But I have to look at it also from a revenue point of view. An awful lot of effort goes into producing a model, and let's just say, you know, I can see I'll do 500 of those, or I can put the same amount of effort and I can sell 8,000 of those. Now, which one would you do? Now, it doesn't always follow like that, because, you know, some locos, like the one behind you, you know, we'll do 500. But there's always a rationale behind it. At the moment, to answer your question fully, is there's enough for us to be doing on Double O rather than start wandering over.
Hornby likes to announce models only after they have progressed through part, or even in some cases, nearly all of the production and development process, in contrast to some other manufacturers who will tend to announce models very early in the development process. I wonder if you can tell us a little bit about the benefits and downsides of operating like this, and wonder why Hornby has chosen to often leave it until quite late in the process to make the market aware of particular models.
Yeah, no, it's another good question. I've never been one, I don't think the company's ever been one to sort of put a stake in the ground and say that's our product. we will always paddle our own canoe. One of the problems you have, and Hornby did wander into this in between, my sabbatical years, was they, like the Merchant Navy, they announced it in 2015 and actually released, was it 15 or 14? But eventually released it in 2017. The problem you have is if you announce things and then 2 years later, because it can take that long for a model to come from why don't we do it to it's on the shelf, it loses its shine. Somebody will get the cat and oh, there's nothing new. Well, yes, because we told you it was new 2 years ago, and that's what people remember. So I mean, I can listen to an argument both sides on this, but I've always felt that come January, you announce what you want to launch in that year. Circumstances over the last few years has meant that some trip over into the following year. But it is really, what's in the 2021 catalogue, I would love to think will be in the shops in 21, not in 23. You see what I mean? So it just keeps a freshness about it, really.
Yeah.
When we come unstuck, we have come unstuck with a model we'd drawn and we were about to launch, and Bachmann announced it, and they had actually started to tool it, and it was virtually ready to come out. So that was an occasion where we thought, sorry, we're going to have to write that time off, all that development time and all the rest of it. Have to get it. There are other occasions where it's too late. We're too far down the road to back away. I'm not a great one for, as I said, we paddle our own canoe, and that's what we do. It really is a question of move. We have to move forward. I'm thinking things like the APT and the 91, for example. 91 was planned. It was announced by.
I'm trying. Was it Cavalex?
Cavalex. Sorry, I apologise to Cavalex. I do apologise. Yeah, they had announced it, but we'd already started the program, and we'd got we had a 91 in there, and it'd been in the range since the 80s, and it was something that really, really did annoy me for so many different reasons. But I really wanted to get it replaced because one, it's heritage.
Yeah.
Two, it had lots of liveries and little changes. And two, it wasn't going to be scrapped because I knew it was going to end up in Wales and it'll pop up at other places as well. And also, it would make a great freight loco as well. It was originally designed not only as hauling passenger stuff, but also freight. So my feeling was it was going to be in available and out there for some years to come. And I wanted to it was one of those things I really, really, really wanted to get right. And to be honest, if Bachmann hadn't announced their 90, I would have done the same with the 90, quite frankly. They were two locos that really, I always felt Hornby could have done a better job. They used design that was basically 60s rather than they should have done 80s. If you look back in time, you'll see back in the 80s you had Lima. They got detail on the bodies. They've got lots of nice fiddly bits. And I remember talking to the designers and saying, look, can we have something that's equivalent to what Lima got? Got nice detail and so on. And they nodded. And of course, at the end of the day, different time, different people. We got a 60s design 90 and a 60s design 91. and
Mm.
that really, really upset me. Similarly, the coaches weren't too bad, the Mark IV coaches, but again, what's the point of having a nice, sparkly 91, all bells and whistles, pulling, a 30-year-old
Yeah.
coach? So, hence, but again, that's a good case in point. People say, oh, what are you going to do with Mark IV coaches? Well, we kept the powder dry on that because there was no point in announcing them because I knew they weren't going to be ready till 21.
Yeah.
So that probably illustrates, what I
Mm.
was saying about announcing things too early.
Definitely. Also want to ask, how has improved production techniques made it possible to consider making models of prototypes that may not have been previously possible? And it's something that people sometimes say to me. So I will ask you, do you think you'll ever run out of commercially viable prototypes to make new models of?
I think eventually the answer is yes, it has to be. I think
Hmm.
we've already reached that where diesel's electric. I mean, I read the comments about the 21 range. To paraphrase, it was nothing new for me. It's all being done by other people, and they're right. There's no point in me producing another, I don't know, another 37 or another 47 because they're out there, and there's a lovely one coming through. So what am I doing? That area is well covered.
Hmm.
Where steam is concerned, for example, yeah, there's lots of classes that haven't been touched on. And I know that I could choose any of those and have a if you like, a limited run of a. There's got to be loads of J's that we haven't touched on,
Hmm.
but it would be limited sales. It would be limited
Yeah.
sales. Now the obvious comeback of that, you say, well, why did you do the hush hush? There was one.
Yeah.
And the answer to that is, yeah, but what I want. I mean, it
Yeah.
is one of those locos that people look at and think, well, not my era, not my region, but I've got to have one. I mean,
Yeah.
how many big boys, American big boys, do you think have been sold in the UK to people who don't model American railways?
Quite a lot, I would guess.
Exactly. Why? Because it's a fabulous looking logo.
Yeah.
That's, aesthetics do come into
Yeah.
these things.
And I suppose sometimes you get a certain model, it might have been limited geographically, limited in its time frame, but when you look at it, it has that certain something that makes people think, well, that's quite, I just want one of those. And I know that there have been models over the years that have come out from various manufacturers where if you just looked at the nuts and bolts, the raw numbers of it, they shouldn't have sold as well as they did, but they did because there was something about them that people just kind of went, I don't care that I've got no prototypical need for it. There's just something about that model that makes me want to buy it.
Correct. And I think, I'll turn the clock back to whenever it was 2014, 2013, the P2. We produced that model in the railroad range. The orders for that and people buying it, and it's railroad. It wasn't necessarily bristling with lots of detail.
Yeah, yeah.
Was colossal. And that was really like a fanfare of for really what the P2 team were doing up at Darlington. And it is funny how over time your attitudes change and the way your mind works. And I was, come next year, 22, possibly at the end of this year, the P2 up at Darlington will be steaming.
Mm.
The PR exposure to that locomotive, that's another, it looks fantastic.
Yeah.
And that, to me, I see an opportunity, a strong marketing opportunity to produce a model of that P2 because it is out there.
Hmm.
But at the same time, if I'm going to do a really super duper model of that, well, turn the clock back because there's the Earl Marischal. Why don't we do that?
Hmm.
There are subtle differences, there are subtle changes, but from designing one, I might as well design that. Oh, and by the way, there's the president, nice streamlined front. I mean, who can resist that lovely streamlined finish? That's another loco. They think, wow, gonna have.
Yeah.
So it becomes a family, if you like, of locomotives, and it wasn't an accident that they introduced last year the A2, 2, and 3 models because of obviously their heritage and their link back to the original P2s.
Yeah.
So, there's a story there. I love stories.
Yeah. And so, I mean, I presume when the P2, the replica that's being built, actually goes into steam, then that's another golden opportunity for that model to make a new reappearance.
Agree. I mean, that P2, the Prince of Wales we are producing, will be a replica of the full size. So it isn't a direct, it is a P2, but it's a P2 produced for 21st century. For example, not many people know this, but it's actually an inch lower than the original P2.
Is that to get the clearances under the overhead line?
Clearances, yes, exactly. So our model will be that exactly like that. The Earl Marischal, if you scale it, and I know people will now, you will find it is actually an inch higher than the Prince of Wales.
Right.
In scale terms. And that's a millimetre. Oh, no, it's less than a millimetre, but it will be. We will have that difference.
Right.
So, yeah. So, it's. I'm really looking forward to the steaming, but also the P2s. They're going to look stunning. Just like the Hush Hush.
Yeah, it's one of those models where you look at it and you think, actually, it's the aesthetic quality. It just makes you want to buy it. And I know certainly with the London and North Eastern Railway, they were very, very switched on to how things looked with, the Art Deco style. The aesthetics were often as important as the functionality of the item.
They were very big on marketing. In the early days, they had they would, and Sir Nigel Gresley would be, looking for opportunities all the time to get the LNER into the newspapers, so that running the steam, going, running with the mallard to get that steam record, that sort of thing. Anything from a PR point of view, they were ahead of the game. They really were.
Very much. But what about the technology? Has that opened up as improvements in manufacturing has advanced? Has that made certain models more viable than maybe 5 or even 10 years ago? You wouldn't have thought it able to make that model.
No, not necessarily. I think what's happened over the last 5 years, certainly development CAD, so you can get more detail into a model. But no, if we felt that a particular loco, like the Hush Hush, had potential, we would do it. It would have nothing really to do with the design or whatever, because the same amount of design would go into it. If we're looking, I think what you're saying is initially, with the first P2 we did for railroad, the attitude there was like that. We have a brand, we have a development technique. The Duke of Gloucester, for example, we can produce the model, pared down a bit, but the fact that technology has moved on, no, I don't think it would make any difference whether a scarce loco or whatever. At the end of the day, what I have to look at, will it sell? I don't want locos just sitting on the shelf or on a whim. And that's the thing. I've always been interested in the business side of life, as well as producing something that people want to buy, because that's the passion of it all. There's a balance. I don't think technology has anything to do with it.
So it's been great talking to you, but I just wanted to leave you with a final question. Is where do you see Hornby being over the next 10 years? Is there a direction as a company that you're looking to take? Is there areas of the hobby as well which you think are going to become bigger and more important, such as the range of TTS sound chips or something similar to that?
For me to say where I see in 10 years, I've already said, we have a 5-year plan, and really, I would rather keep that close to my chest, as most people would expect. I hope. What I can say is, I firmly believe that there is a strong future in model railways. I see terrific developments happening in line with modern technology. I tell you what I really would like to see, and I'm not sure how feasible, because I struggle. We struggle with room in these things. I'd love to see a viable, something that most people can afford, and that would be steam or smoke or whatever you want to call it, coming out of a chimney of a loco, or a strong exhaust coming out of an HST or 66 or whatever. I'd love to see that. I think that element of authenticity is lacking. Of course, there are smoke machines out there that people fit to locos, etc. But it's not in everybody's pocket, and it's not necessary commercially. But it isn't just a question of saying, wouldn't it be nice?
I suppose one area that you could look at is, those vaping things that people using that kind of a technology. And you could also have the authentic smell then with that. Although why somebody would want diesel fumes in their house, I really don't know.
No, I mean, we live steam was terrific. Because you did get that lovely smell of steam and oil. And that's the sort of thing. You're right. A vape type thing, but it has. The problem it has is it has to be safe.
Yes.
It has to pass all the and people hate this, but it has to pass toy safety regulations. You can't just do it and pump this stuff into the atmosphere, and for the government or the governing bodies look at these things as toys. Really, they come under that classification. And I think the problems, safety problems, and everything else that goes with it. And the other thing is that, of course, if you start wiring these up to the DCC, there has to be some sort of cut-off, because if that vape material burns off, you've still got this coil burning away quite nicely. And what used to happen when we had the smoke generators and DCC was coming in, was that people forgot to put the oil in, that coil kept heating up and eventually melted the body of the loco.
Yeah.
So, these are all things you have to take into account. But I'd love to see, a 66 starter for a 37 starter, and you get that big, that big smoke comes out, or the exhaust comes out, and off it goes. Imagine that, with a good old HST, I think, it's all part and parcel of the atmosphere.
I'd like to extend a big thank you to Simon Kohler for taking the time out to join us and to have a conversation with me about all things Hornby. But don't forget to tickle that like button, and sharing is caring, so do please consider sharing us on social media. And if you haven't already done so, then do subscribe to the channel and ring that bell to be the first to know about new notifications. But until next time, this is me, Jenny Kirk, saying it's been great having your company, and happy modelling. See you next time. Today's video is sponsored by Trainomatic, makers of DCC decoders designed to be fully compatible with every manufacturer's locomotive. Visit train-o-matic.com to browse the full range and see what they've got suitable for you. I'd like to send out a huge thanks to everybody who supports me on Patreon, and an extra special huge thanks goes out to Anthony Kidson, Michael Churchwood, Anthony Hunt, William Wade, Wayne Johns, Offshore Allen, oorail.co.uk, Tepic, Michael Lockie, Helen Sink, Peter Bolton, Brian and Dorothy Mudd, Gary Lewis, David Quinn, Sparky 107, George Botterini, Andy Finch, Chris Moss, Robert Sears, MD of San Juan Model Company and Grant Line Products, Sam Yates, Dale Williams, and Mo Henry. Thank you. Without you guys, I couldn't do this.